Read 27, 28, 29. So Thursday, 27th January, Mr. Hill gave me the address of Sachin Majumdar. At this point, we don't know who these two people are. Prabhupada was looking for a tape recorder, and that was because now whenever he had his spare time, he was continuing his writing. He had a typewriter. And his classes, because they were going on regularly, he wanted to start taping them. So he was looking in the newspapers and going to different shops, trying to find a proper tape recorder that he could use in that service. So he was inquiring from a camera house, Mr. Eric's friend, Mr. Dick. Then from the previous week, one Mrs. Milapsky, she had taken a set of books and now paid $16. We'll notice that sometimes Prabhupada would give discounts. Sometimes he would sell the sets for $13. Sometimes he would only sell one volume. So depending upon the persons, whether they were able to afford the whole $16, his first sale was to Captain Pandya, from whom he took $20. So depending upon the persons, he was taking that fee. Today, Mr. Cohen met. That's Mr. Harvey Cohen, who Prabhupada especially became friendly with since the meeting in the ashram, Ananda ashram. He gave his address and invited me to see his apartment in the downtown. Because Harvey Cohen, he was living in the Bowery. Many artists and musicians, because they wanted to live in New York City for their work, they couldn't afford the high prices living uptown, where Prabhupada now was. So the Lower East Side, that includes Greenwich Village and around Tompkins Square, even the Bowery, Lower East Side of Manhattan, that's over on this side, there a lot of immigrants had come to stay. First the Dutch, the Germans, the Jewish, the Puerto Ricans, and it was more or less different ghettos. Ghettos means one ethnic group would live all together. The Chinese, there was a little Chinatown, there was a little Italy, there was even a little India, which came later. It was all down there in the lower portion of Manhattan. So Harvey Cohen, being an artist, what the government did was, because previously in these big buildings, you see they're all 4 or 5 story high buildings, there used to be workshops, sweatshops, where they would have the people in a huge long room, empty, they would set up their work manufacturing systems. And then when the work was stopped, when the businesses moved from there were these gigantic spaces to fill. So the government arranged that the artists, the musicians, and the poorer people, they could rent these artist-in-residence lofts. So Harvey, he had rented one of them inexpensively, a gigantic space, maybe 3 times the size of this room. And because of the you can say criminal elements or the distasteful elements in New York City that Harvey was experiencing, even amongst his friends, he wanted to leave. He didn't want to live in New York anymore. And Harvey, just to see Prabhupada, to hear his classes and speak with him, Harvey would travel all the way from the Bowery to the Upper Central Park West to attend his classes. So now Harvey has invited Prabhupada. Harvey felt that Prabhupada didn't belong on the Upper West Side because there were no young people living there. It was all posh apartments and offices and businesses. So Harvey was trying to convince Prabhupada to come down where the young people are. The young people needed Prabhupada. They needed to hear his message. So now Harvey, he has invited Prabhupada, you come and see my place because I'm moving. I won't be in New York anymore. And you can stay in my place. and then you can have your classes and your kirtans there. So this picture, because the Bowery, originally the Dutch had come to America and settled on this very fertile and very nicely placed, secure island of Manhattan. They had purchased the land from the American Indians by bartering different things that they liked, knives, ribbons, cloth, things like that. So the Dutch first took over, and Bowery, there's a Dutch word, it means gardens. So originally that whole area was beautiful gardens, and there were roads and people's houses, and they were growing things. But then as New York City became filled with more and more immigrants, the neighborhood changed. And now the Bowery, at the time when Prabhupada came to live there, was called Skid Row. Skid Row means that when you're completely at the end of your line, you've fallen into intoxication, you've lost your job, you've lost your family's rejected you because you're an alcoholic, you have nowhere to turn, you come to live on Skid Row on the Bowery. And on the Bowery it was flop houses. Flop houses means you check in the evening, let's say you pay a little bit of money, $1, I'm just guessing. You can sleep there in the night, all lined up, all these men who had no homes. And then in the morning you would get kicked out at 6 in the morning. So all day you would have to be on the streets either begging or stealing or finding some way to get your shut up. So this is where such people lived on the Bowery. And the block where Prabhupada was going to be living consisted of 2 saloons. Saloons are madulais. They're bars. A flop house, that's where these men would sleep at night, who could, in fact, some of them couldn't even afford to stay in the flop houses. They would just sleep on the staircases. And people would come and pick their pockets all night long. The other drunkards would come and pick the other drunkards' pockets. It was a very degraded place. And there were 2 buildings with lofts. So in one of those buildings, it was number 92, I believe. In one of those buildings, that was where Harvey Cohen's loft was. So Prabhupada, as usual, he gave his expenses, vegetables, bus fare, means he was going somewhere that day, because the place he went that day was, he went down to the Bowery to see Harvey Cohen's room. And he will come tomorrow, and they will discuss Prabhupada moving down there. So Saturday 29th, Mr. Hill will call me at 10 to 10:30. There's a Gita meeting in the studio at 4 p.m. So Prabhupada was having regularly his Bhagavad Gita classes, but until he got his tape recorder, we've lost those classes. The first class that he gave on his tape recorder was 3 hours long, and it's still available for us to hear. I copied a little bit of it. I don't know if we'll be able to hear it. But on the nights even when nobody came to hear Prabhupada's classes, has anyone ever been assigned to give a class and you walk into the temple or the class and there's no audience? There's always an audience, because Krishna is there, he's listening. And the walls are there. And the insects and so many living entities are in the room that we can't see. So Prabhupada, when no one would show up for his classes, once he got his tape recorder, he would turn on the tape recorder and give the class anyway. And then when people did come for the next class, he would play that for them and they would be very charmed by it. So now Prabhupada is arranging, let me just play that for you so you can hear Prabhupada. The first thing he recorded was the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita.
Oh God.
So the Mangalacharanam that we hear, that Prabhupada wrote in the Bhagavad Gita, that's exactly what Prabhupada is singing here. And then he goes on to speak the entire introduction of the Bhagavad Gita. And he played this for the boys who would come, the boys and girls who would come, and they were mesmerized by Prabhupada's chanting of the mantras. They had never heard anything like it before. So, Mr. Hill informed that Sachin Mazumdar can be contacted on phone and thus meet him. Mr. Cohen came at 4 p.m. with friends and heard me for 1.5 hours up to 5:30 p.m. That's the Bhagavad Gita classes. He has taken away 1 set of books on approval. 2 sets of books received back from Paragon Book Gallery, making altogether 3 new sets taken back from them. So Paragon holding their books, his set of books, he would keep a tally with them because he would take from them every time he had to sell his book sets. And he would also check with them what they had sold, and they would give him money at that time. So today, that particular day, was Sri Advaita Acharya's appearance day. And Prabhupada, he later set the rule for us that any Vishnu Tattva appearance, we don't celebrate Vishnu Tattva's disappearance. Prabhupada told us once, we don't like to hear about the disappearance of the Lord. So we celebrate the appearance days of the Lord. No one celebrates when Krishna left this world. It's not a day of celebration for us, but we celebrate with great pomp Janmashtami Day. So Prabhupada observes the Vishnu Tattva appearance days by Ekadasi fast. Generally, it's till moonrise. But on some Ekadasi fasts, on the appearance days, we only do until noon. For instance, on Ramnomi, Nityananda Trayodasi. Nowadays, we're also doing on Balaram's appearance day. But the general rule that Prabhupada set was Vishnu Tattva appearance days, we fast until moonrise, and then we break with Ekadasi and have the feast the next day. So Prabhupada, although in India all of his god brothers and the members of the Gaudiya Math, they were all celebrating Advaita Acharya's Avirbhav, Prabhupada was all alone. And he celebrated it by giving a Bhagavad Gita class, by continuing with his translations, and continuing with his book distribution. Now, January 30th, we're reading now from the Prabhupada Lilamrita. The East Coast was hit by severe blizzards. 7 inches of snow fell on the city, with winds up to 50 miles an hour. That's about 70 kilometers per hour. The winds were so strong. The city of New York offered warm rooms and meals for people living in tenements without heat. JFK Airport, that's the international airport, was closed, as were train lines and roadways into the city. For the second time within 8 days, a state of emergency was declared because of snow. So this is 75th Street. Prabhupada was on 72nd Street, and he would have to walk on this path to get to Dr. Mishra's house. So he wasn't able to go when it was snowing like this. It just meant that whatever he had in his room, that was all he had to eat. And he even wrote that sometimes, because he only got to cook once a day, he would suffer from starvation at nighttime. These are the austerities that Prabhupada accepted just so that we could all be here today. As a lone individual, Srila Prabhupada could not do anything about the snow emergency or the international warfare. That's the Vietnam War that was going on. He saw these as mere symptoms of the age of Kali. Always there would be misery in the material world. But if he could bring Radha and Krishna to a building in New York, nothing was impossible for the Supreme Lord. Even in the midst of Kali Yuga, a golden age could appear and people could get relief. If Americans could take to Krishna consciousness, the whole world would follow. Seeing through the eyes of the scriptures, Srila Prabhupada pushed on through the blizzard and pursued the thin trail for support of his Krishna consciousness movement. So, in America and places where there's a lot of snow, there are different types of snow. For instance, in Alaska, you can have 10 different words that mean snow. Wet snow, dry snow, icy snow. Just like here in India, we have different types of rains. We have a brishti, we have a heavy tufan, like that. So snow, you can do with the snow once it falls. You just have to wait for it to melt, throw some salt, and the whole city, 12 million people, were completely in a state of emergency because of Adi Daivik. So now on Monday, the 31st of January, Prabhupada says on Sunday, that on the 30th, too much snow falling today, and the wind blowing very severely, so I could not go to Dr. Mishra's apartment for meals. Somehow or other, I managed my bath and meals in the studio. He was able to come down out of his apartment and get some milk and butter for 51 cents. So 75th Street is the road that Prabhupada walked along. You can see here all the people, they're out shoveling in front of their houses because that's the law. But still it's impossible to move because some people, they're not in their houses. So there's big mountains of snow that you can't walk through. Monday, the 31st of January. Today I met two foundations, Carnegie Corporal Sage Foundation, to contact again tomorrow by phone. Expenditure bus fare, 30 cents. So in America, there were very wealthy industrialists, and they had collected so much from their successful businesses that they turned that money into philanthropic activities, mostly educational, also for research, scientific research. So the Carnegie Corporation, that was begun by one Mr. Carnegie, and he had a fund of $2 billion to give in charity. And he had different sections, departments, looking for who are the fit people to give charity to. Carnegie Corporation of New York, it's at Madison Avenue. So Prabhupada from uptown, he would take a bus into the center of the city where all of these office buildings were. Madison Avenue is where the top businesses are. It's a very posh part of New York City. The corporation considered itself a trendsetter in philanthropy, often funding research or providing seed money for ideas. Well, that sounds promising. Prabhupada's idea was to bring Krishna consciousness to America, to begin a Radha Krishna temple. In 1965 to 67, the foundation began to respond to claims by various groups, including women, for increased power and wealth. So mostly they were interested in supporting the people who needed help within the American community. They weren't that interested in philanthropic activity in other countries. The corporation developed 3 interlocking objectives: prevention of educational disadvantage. For instance, Mr. Carnegie started because he made his money from steel plants, huge steel factories in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right near Butler. Prabhupada, he went to Pittsburgh and then went to Butler. So Carnegie Mellon University is there in Pittsburgh for the arts, for developing the arts and sciences. So this is where they put their money. Equality of educational opportunity in the schools. Now, at this time still, there was segregation in some parts of America. The black people were not allowed to go to the same schools as the white people. And therefore, the black people did not get as good as an education. So these big funds would give scholarships to disadvantaged people like that. Equality of educational opportunity in the schools and broadened opportunities in higher education. A fourth objective cutting across these programs was to improve the democratic performance of government. So, because it was a private fund by an industrialist, he had to cooperate with the government. Otherwise, the government would take all the money away in taxes. Just as here, now they have a system, what is it called?
CSR.
CSR.
Corporate Social Responsibility.
Yes. CSR now they've started. That anyone who is above profit at a certain standard, they have to give a certain percentage of that to charity. And therefore, because ISKCON is a charitable organization, we're able to tap into those charitable funds. But Prabhupada had no organization. He was just a lone man at that time. He only had his books to show. So, as hard as he tried, he was reading and learning from Mr. Bogart what these big institutions were for giving charity, but he had nothing to show except for his books. Then the Russell Sage Foundation, Prabhupada tried. That's at 112 East 64th Street. The foundation dedicates itself to strengthening the methods, data, theoretical core of the social sciences in order to better understand societal problems and develop informed responses. It supports visiting scholars, so that could have been Prabhupada, in residence, and publishes books and a journal under its own imprint. So Prabhupada wasn't just going door to door. He was very specifically picking these foundations that had within their mission statements, could have helped Prabhupada if they chose to. It also funds researchers at other institutions and supports programs intended to develop new generations of social scientists. The foundation focuses on labor markets, immigration, and ethnicity, and social inequality in the United States, as well as behavioral economics. So these are American concentric fundraisers. They're mostly interested in uplifting and alleviating the social inequalities within America itself. And Prabhupada was bringing something very foreign to the American culture. He was bringing vegetarianism. He was bringing complete surrender to God. He was bringing, for the first time, books translated from Sanskrit. So this was an unknown field for these foundations. And therefore, as hard as Prabhupada tried, he wasn't getting much success in that field. But we heard and we saw last week how the churches, they were inviting Prabhupada to speak. So those along the line of religion and faith in God, they were interested in Prabhupada's message. So on Tuesday, February 1st, because Satsru Maharaj, he goes from January 30th to February 1st in the Lilamrita, now we can fill in those missing days from Prabhupada's diary. Today phoned Mr. Felix Morrow of the University Books. He said his Hindu representative is looking into the matter, and as soon as he finishes his task, he will let me know. Expenditure, bus fare, 30 cents. It is arranged today by phone that the Universalist Church will allow a house for holding meeting on every Wednesday evening from 7:30 to 9 p.m. Mr. Cohen informed about this. So Harvey Cohen, he was searching for places where Prabhupada's message could be heard. And because the Universal Church They have 5 basic principles that very much agreed with what Prabhupada was teaching. Number 1, the belief in God. That's very special because religions, even in America, you can call your religion atheism. It's whatever your belief system is. But they believe in God. And they believe in Jesus Christ. So Prabhupada also respected Jesus Christ as a Shaktavish avatar, as the Son of God. But Prabhupada added that there are many sons of God. For instance, when Krishna was on the planet, he married 16,108 queens. With each queen he had 10 sons. That means he had over 160,000 sons. So Jesus Christ, yes, he came from God to deliver his message and bring everyone back to God. But Prabhupada, he explained that he is not the only son of God. We're all sons and daughters of God. Next, the immortality of the human soul. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, we understand that's a very basic principle that separates the devotees from the demons. Because the demons, so long as they believe that there's no life after this present life, that means they can do any type of sinful activity and they'll get no reaction whatsoever. But when you understand the eternality of the soul, then you have to be very careful not to break the rules of God. So number 4, this is why there's so many different factions in the Christian faith. Sinful actions have consequence. Yes, we understand God has given laws in the Judeo-Christian, because this is where Prabhupada's preaching. There were 10 commandments. What is the first commandment? Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy might. So God is there. God's given the first commandment. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Other ones, thou shalt not commit adultery. Well, that's no illicit sex. Thou shalt not kill. That means no meat eating. But they interpret it differently. And therefore, many different factions are there. So the number 5 is the basis of this Universalist Church of America. Because according to Orthodox Catholicism and other factions of Christianity, whatever sins you commit in this lifetime, if you've sinned so much, then you have to go to hell. And you'll have to suffer in hell for the rest of eternity. Now, we have read all about the different hellish planets in the 5th canto. And we know that the hellish planets are temporary punishments for particular sins. And then after we've been punished, we're then placed in a particular body according to the sinful reactions of our previous life. That means that there is reconciliation. It's not eternal damnation, that you stay in hell forever. This lifetime, you're judged. We also understand that Chitragupta, he's writing, and in sinful people, well, they ran out of pages, like with Jagai and Madhai. They couldn't even read it all. Their list was so long. Yes, there's Chitragupta. He's the secretary of Yamaraj. And then one is brought, you see the pictures in the Srimad Bhagavatam. They're tied up with subtle ropes and dragged across hot sands to the hellish planets, to Yamaloka, where they're judged. And then they're placed in particular hellish planets according to their degree of sinfulness. But in the Universalist Church, they believe in universal reconciliation. And that means they see God as a forgiving person. That he loves us, we've committed sins, but after suffering for the reactions of our sins, then there's reconciliation. We can then come back to a holy life if we choose to. So this very much agrees with the Vedic concept of transmigration of the soul. The Universalists believe that God is the loving parent of all people. Jesus Christ reveals the nature and character of God to a point. He doesn't tell us what his address is, what his phone number is, what he does during the day, what he eats, but at least he says that God exists and he has a kingdom. And humankind is created with an immortal soul, which death cannot end. Universalism is a doctrine that teaches all people will be saved. And the main argument for universalism is that a good and loving God would not condemn people to eternal torment in hell. So therefore, Prabhupada's message very much agreed with what was being presented in this church, and therefore, with open arms, they invited Prabhupada to give his message there once every week for an hour and a half. Wednesday, the 2nd of February. Remember, freezing cold now. The blizzard, the snow doesn't go away. The snow stays there, and you have to work around it. Still, Prabhupada was going on the buses, traveling to the foundations, traveling to the bookshops, going to the church. Today I have delivered one set of books to Mr. Lindsay R. Moss, one assistant of the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. That's another big foundation Prabhupada was trying to get finances from, for presenting the same to President Mr. Everett Case of the foundation. I have also posted one letter addressed to the President. One letter is sent to Mr. Henry J. Levy, buyer of M.S. Brentano's bookseller. Expenditure bus fare 30 cents, potato, banana, and apple 73 cents. Now, Prabhupada, finally, he's found a tape recorder. One SD20 tape recorder from MS Peerless Cash Memo such and such, dated for $54.02, guaranteed for 90 days. In the evening, there is a lecture at the Universalist Church, West 76th Street and Central Park West. So this Brentanos, they had four bookshops just in New York. And if Prabhupada was able to get his books there, because it says all books in all languages. But Brentanos, they aimed for very elite people. They never gave discounts on their books. They had their bookshop on Fifth Avenue in the most expensive part of town. So Prabhupada, he didn't have any success with Brentanos, and they lost their opportunity to help Srila Prabhupada. Now this Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, they're coming from the General Motors. Also billions of dollars to give in charity, just looking for the right people. They make grants in 7 broad subjects known within the foundation as major program areas: science, economics, STEM higher education, digital information technology, public understanding of science, technology and economics, working longer, energy and environment. So somehow or other, Prabhupada, he felt, because Prabhupada, he saw everything as an opportunity, that Krishna is in everyone's heart, so let me knock on all these doors of people who could help if they choose to. Therefore, he went and approached directly to the President, Everett Case. He wrote a letter to him and sent a set of books to him as well. Now, February 3rd. Today there was a very nice demonstration of tape record Sankirtan by me, because just the day 2 days before, Prabhupada has bought his tape recorder, so he was now starting to tape. Today there was a very nice demonstration of tape record Sankirtan by me. It is all grace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Haridas Thakur said that the transcendental sound of Harinam would even purify the heart of birds and beasts. Today, this statement of Thakur Haridas is corroborated. Prabhupada's putting the Americans in the category of the birds and the beasts. These Americans cannot understand even a word's meaning of the Sankirtan, and yet they were so much attracted. It is all Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's power. There was no credit for me. One set of books sold, $13 with no expenditure. So Prabhupada, the one that I had that little bit of Prabhupada singing, that 3-hour long. As soon as he got that tape recorder, he used it in Krishna's service. He spoke for 3 hours straight, the entire introduction of Bhagavad Gita, and you'll see at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita introduction, the Mangalacharanam. So this was what Prabhupada had the young boys and girls who came to Prabhupada's classes, he played that for them, and they were mesmerized by it. They loved it. So then Prabhupada got a new idea. We'll hear about that. So now we've caught up, February 4th. This is what Satsrup Maharaj says here. Prabhupada wrote again to Tirtha Maharaj, who had agreed to try for the government's sanction if he first received written confirmation from a responsible donor pledging the funds for a temple. Prabhupada informed him that the donor would be Sir Padampat Singhania, and he enclosed Mr. Singhania's favorable letter of the 14th. Prabhupada reminded his godbrother. So we'll read the whole letter. There's just one part in it. So here's what Prabhupada says about this special day. Engagement with Mr. Henry J. Levy, buyer of Messrs. Brentano's at 9:30 a.m. on 5th Avenue. Mr. Levy was duly seen, but he has no scope for selling my books. One set book delivered to Oriental against price deposited yesterday. One book taken back from Julian Ben. 2 sets of books taken back from MS Paragon Book Gallery. Received 1 letter from Tirtha Maharaj. So Prabhupada had written to Tirtha Maharaj, we heard that letter, requesting him that with his influence, because he had in his grasp all the wealthy Marwaris in Calcutta, he wanted Tirtha Maharaj to raise funds to fulfill Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's desire to open temples in the Western countries and to approach Dr. Radhakrishnan, the President of India, to allow funds to come out of India. On his asking for the letter of the donor, he has been given the letter from Sir Padampat Singhania and requested him to take sanction for exchange not less than 10 lakhs. Expenditure 30 cents. One Indian young businessman met. His name is Rabinder Srivatsava, care of CG Trading Corporation, dealing in carpets. His address registered. So Prabhupada was also, of course, naturally he would be very happy to meet gentlemen and ladies coming from India. He would strike up conversations with them. In fact, when Prabhupada met one of his earliest students, that was Howard Wheeler, who was a professor who had just come back from India looking for a guru. And Howard Wheeler, he immediately was attracted to Prabhupada, understanding that he was a sadhu from India. So he went up to Prabhupada, and naturally, he was naturally attracted to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada, he asked, "Oh, are you from India?" "Yes, I'm from India." And Prabhupada said, "And you?" "No, I'm not from India." So naturally, with the small amount of Indian population in America, Indians would be attracted to each other, and they struck up friendships. And Prabhupada was able to get the diaspora in America at that time to help him in different ways, just as when at the New India House, Prabhupada was able to give that very successful lecture on Rabindranath Tagore's birthday. There were 4 Brentanos in New York. The Fifth Avenue flagship store at Rockefeller Center, one in Greenwich Village. So Rockefeller Center is the most expensive center part of New York City. Greenwich Village is where the young people were. One in Manhasset and one in White Plains. That was the outskirts of New York City. So Prabhupada, every day we're seeing, he never gave up. Although the weather was so difficult, although he had no facility to cook in his own place, he'd have to walk 7-8 blocks just to cook a meal. Although his expenses, he's writing down 30 cents and he's asking Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj to arrange 10 lakhs for him. So Prabhupada never thought small. Even though he was living by the pennies, he was aiming for that temple of Radha and Krishna in New York City. And he was going to get it. Now, on this day, Prabhupada writes a second letter to Sripad Tirtha Maharaj. Kindly accept my humble dandavats. I am in due receipt of your kind letter of the first instant, and I am glad to note that you will get the exchange sanction on receipt of the letter of the donor. The donor is a big business magnate of India, and as required by you, I am enclosing here with the letter of Sri Padampat Singhania of the JK Organization's Kamala Tower, Kanpur, dated 14th January 1966, which will speak for itself. Now you'll remember that in that letter, Mr. Singhania brought up 2 points. First of all, he loved the idea of having a temple in America. But the sanction would have to be given by RBI in order to get money out of India. And he would not be willing to give anything if it were a rented building. He would send his own men and spend millions of dollars to build a genuine, according to Vastu and Shastra, Radha Krishna temple. So there were 2 blockages. But still the letter was favorable because he wrote, I'm ready to help you at any time once these 2 problems are solved. I think you may also know that gentleman and he is competent to spend any amount for a nice temple of Sri Sri Radha Krishna in New York. The Singhania family is traditionally devotees of Dwarkadish, and therefore they are the right persons to take up this transcendental service of the Lord. Now, how many of you have been to Dwarka? Quite a few. Oh, that's nice. So we visited Dwarkadish before any of the Westerners went there, 1975, because we were invited by the college there to place books in their library. So we traveled there for book distribution, and it was very, very quiet because, as you know, Dwarka is way on the other side of a big desert, right on the seacoast. So very few people would visit at that time because it was a long train ride through the desert. And because we were foreigners, the Pujari of Dwarkadish, he was so accommodating and so happy to see us. It wasn't like at Jagannath Puri and Sri Rangam at that time, no entry. No, not only did he welcome us, but he brought us in, and while he was doing the Shringar, undressing Dwarkadish, bathing him, anointing him with oils, and then putting on his dresses, he made us sit there and watch as he did all the puja. That's how loving he was when he saw that Vaishnavas had come all the way to Dwarka. And then he had us go on a tour of the whole Dwarkadish temple. And they had, do you know that they have Srimati Radharani there in the Dwarkadish temple? but not in the same form that we worship her. In Dwarka, she has 4 arms. Yes, because they see everyone as coming from Vaikuntha. Even Srimati Radharani, they blessed her with an extra 2 arms as an extra opulence. So, yes, that is the worship in Dwarka, very opulently. Because when Krishna, just as we're reading about the Shamantaka jewel now in Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, what did Krishna need the Shamantaka jewel for? He didn't need it. He had so much opulence. Overnight, he had Vishwakarma build all of Dwarka with thousands upon thousands of palaces, no need of electricity. There were so many jewels. The reflection of the jewels would light up the houses. So Krishna doesn't need opulence. But for those who worship Krishna in the mood of reverence and awe and Aishwarya, therefore, he has that for that class of devotees. And Mr. Singhania, that was the mood in which he worshipped Krishna as Lakshmi Narayan. And therefore, he would not settle for anything less than a magnificent temple in America. Not Prabhupada's idea of just a 3-story rented house. Srila Prabhupada wanted such temples in foreign countries, such as New York, London, Tokyo, etc. And I had personal talks with him when I first met him at Ultadingi in 1922. Now here is a chance for me to carry out his transcendental order. And because you are Srila Prabhupada's foremost and favorite disciple, and actually engaged in his service, I am just seeking your favor and mercy in making this attempt successful. Everything is ready, namely the house is ready, the donor is ready, and my humble service on the spot is also ready. Now you are to give the finishing touch, because you are most affectionate disciple of His divine grace. I think Srila Prabhupada wants that in this great attempt by my humble self, your valued service may also be dovetailed. So you can hear, who could preach better than Srila Prabhupada? The praise and the flattery and making Bhakti-Vilas Tirtha saying you're the most dearmost disciple, the closest disciple, and I'm sure that Prabhupada wants you to be the one to make this temple. He's giving all credit because Prabhupada knew the system of how to encourage people to engage in Krishna's service. So Bhakti-Vilas Tirtha Maharaj, he was willing, and therefore he replied the letter promptly, and all he needed was that letter that Prabhupada was sending him from Padampat Singhania, and then everything was going to go into motion, except for one thing, and that's on the next day. We have to finish reading this letter. Please therefore immediately take steps in this direction, and if need be, you may personally see Dr. Radhakrishna, because he is sympathetic with the Gaudiya Math workers, as they are sincerely trying to re-spiritualize the whole world. So Gaudiya Math was prominent while Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was on the planet, making 64 maths, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, because his preaching was all done at the time when the British Raj was still there. So he, like in this picture, the governor and the different excellencies coming from the West, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he would invite them to the temples. So it was well known what he was doing in India, even by Dr. Radhakrishnan. He is also personally known to me, but because I am out of India, it is not possible for me to see him. As you will know from the enclosed letter of Sir Padampat Singhania, he is prepared to spend any amount for this purpose. You can get sanction as large an amount as it is possible. Minimum 10 lakhs rupees. So far, men for working here in the temple, do not worry about it. I have already some American young men with me, and they are strictly vegetarian. Besides that, there are many Indian students here, and I shall be able to recruit workers both from Indians and Americans. I am confident of this. I may cite herewith one incident which happened yesterday evening. I have prepared some tape record of my personal kirtan. When one of this tape record was played, the audience became practically charmed by that, although not a single word of my language was understandable by them. Of course, Prabhupada didn't mention that there were only 3, maybe 4 people in the room. It was an audience. So I am confident of the statement of Srila Haridas Thakur that the transcendental sound of Lord Chaitanya's Harinam can do good, even to the birds and the beasts. Undoubtedly, these Americans are habituated to take non-vegetarian food, but I am confident that they can be trained up to our line of living because they are sincere to taking up the training. So Prabhupada, he was able to perform all the miracles that he was just dreaming of now. The top picture is when Prabhupada brought the devotees back to India, and he started the Mayapur Vrindavan festivals. And this is one of the early 1970 festivals where thousands of devotees came, and they took part in the Navadvip Mandal Parikrama just as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had started in the footsteps of Nityananda Prabhu. And then we have on the bottom picture, that's in Germany. So when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati sent one of his disciples to Germany, he was able to bring back 2 devotees. But when Prabhupada sent his one disciple, Shivananda, to Germany, Shivananda was quickly able to attract the youth, open temples, make hundreds of devotees. Prithu, he's one of the devotees that was made at that time, who lives here now, Prithu Prabhu. And the Sankirtan was so powerful. Hundreds of devotees were joining in Europe and having Sankirtan all over in all the major cities. And Prabhupada, not only did he spread Sankirtan, but he had his disciples translate the books into those languages. And those languages became textbooks in the universities as well. So Prabhupada, he had a vision. And step by step, despite all of the personal inconveniences, he was able to see that through to completion, as far as Krishna allowed him in this lifetime. Just as with Gopal Krishna Maharaj, Prabhupada gave him an order to build temples in the Delhi area. How many temples did he make now? 18 temples, and even more are coming up. So this is the parampara, the power coming directly from Krishna through the parampara. And Srila Prabhupada, although Prabhupada, he said, I only met with my Guru Maharaj maximum 12 times in my lifetime. But that spiritual power was there because the Vani, that's what the disciple carries with him wherever he goes. He always feels the presence of his spiritual master through his orders and through his Vani. So Prabhupada, though he was almost penniless, spending 73 cents, 30 cents, what he did was absolutely miraculous and with almost no help. Next. This will be all practically possible as soon as we have regular institution here in New York. If it is possible to send some men from India who must be educated, it is well and good. Otherwise, I shall manage everything by the grace of Srila Prabhupada. We cannot do anything whatsoever, but if our sincere service is accepted by the Vaishnavas, everything is possible, and may not have the audacity to speak all these before your holiness, who is expert in this service. Although Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj, he never went out of India to preach. He went once because he worked in the post postal department of India, a government job. And when he got the Ultadingi ashram for Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he was giving all of his money to support the mat. And meanwhile, he had accumulated many debts. He was very much in debt. And he knew that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati also needed money. So without telling Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he took a postal post, a job, in the Middle East and went there because just as now, people go there, even if they're Hindus, they'll go there because they get very good salary there. So he went there secretly, without telling his Guru Maharaj, made a lot of money, and then brought all that money back to exterminate his debts and to help Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati more. But he didn't go out for preaching. The preaching he did here because he was managing the mutts here for Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. But Prabhupada still is praising him, that you would know better than me because of all of your service, before your holiness who is expert in this service. Please therefore make the transaction complete immediately and oblige. By the by, I beg to enclose herewith one check for rupees 10 as my humble offerings to the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada through your good self, and I wish that you may ask for his blessings for becoming successful in this great attempt for his service. So Prabhupada still had his bank account in India, and that way he was able to pay for all of the supplies that Narayan Maharaj and other helpers, Sri Krishna Pandit, they were sending mridangas, kartals, japa beads, and different things that Prabhupada asked for, harmoniums for his temple. So he would pay from his bank account there. Thanking you once more, and I beg to remain yours obediently, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Oh, time is up. Oh, all right. Next week, Hare Krishna.
One point that you wanted to mention.
Yeah, that's...
So maybe we'll just...
Well, okay, February 5th. If you don't mind, I'll go on. February 5th, from the Prabhupada Lilamrita. Discouragement came to the plans Srila Prabhupada had formed around the promise of support by Padampat Singhania. The Dwarkavala wrote to express his dissatisfaction with the 72nd Street building. This is what Padampat Singhania wrote to Prabhupada. I am afraid that I cannot agree with your suggestion that you should buy a small house and erect something on top of it. Unfortunately, such a kind of proposal will not suit me. The temple must be a small one, but it must be constructed properly. I quite agree that you cannot spend a lot of money at present, but within the amount the government may sanction, you should build something according to the architecture of Indian temples. Then only will we be able to create some impression on the American people. This is all I can write to you in this connection. I am very grateful for your taking the trouble of writing me. Then Satsvarup Maharaj says, Prabhupada did not take this letter as final. He maintained hope that Sir Padampat Singhania would still give money for the temple, if only the transfer of money could be arranged. So the door was still opened, that he would not support the 72nd Street house that Prabhupada was looking at, but he was willing to build a temple. Actually, the only temple that we built in America is in New Vrindavan, the Palace of Gold. Who has seen the Palace of Gold? Just a few devotees. It is absolutely magnificent. A real... People, they go there for sightseeing, not knowing where they're going, and they're so mesmerized by that temple, the beautiful, everything handcrafted by the devotees, down to every single piece of glass in the windows. It is so beautiful. So that desire that Prabhupada had to really make a big temple in America was fulfilled in New Vrindavan eventually. All right, so we'll read what Prabhupada has to say starting at February 5th next week. Hare Krishna. Jai.